Welcome, family, to another edition of Stranger Thinking Media. This is Yeshayahu, and today we want to jump right into it. We want to discuss the passport bros, and not just that, but just in general, um, why Americans are leaving the country in droves. I mean, it's at record-breaking proportions. So today we're going to look at passport bros. And I'm calling it the second Exodus. Question mark, because it's not just passport bros, like I was saying. It's families, it's individuals, it's for different reasons. People are just leaving, and I want to dig into why that's happening. So, topic one, I call it Babylon the Great, uh, out of the house of bondage, from the four corners of the earth, a land flowing with milk and honey, and so there are tons of reasons why this could be happening. Um, we're in a what we call a turning point in our history, and I think everybody feels it. It's kind of a you know it's in the air, it's in the water, it's what you see every day. It's just little things. So let's sit back and enjoy the show. See what conclusions we might come up with.
First in the high.
How did we lose that? Did we lose it on wage? Did we lose it on a crime? Did we lose it? Where did
We
lose
lost it on trust in government and in trust in each other. We are a nastier society. We're not helping each other. Even the giving part of America is going down. It's become a surly, nasty place, and it's showing in the declining happiness. So this is quite a drama.
So, Revelation chapter 18. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of very unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that she be not partakers of her sins, and that she receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. So there are people in this country, in the Western world in general, who really are having a hard time with the amount of change um, that's occurring at this point in time. I mean, the amount of change is incredible. Like, and things. It's not just change; it's things that people that were foundationally looked at as being immoral are now becoming staples of our culture. And so when that happens, I mean, everything from the LGBT community to uh, uh, marriage as an institution to, I mean, things that were foundational to this country and the Western world in general are now being tossed out and replaced by like almost their polar opposites.
Tonight at 11, this is a fascinating trend, though. So more Americans are leaving the United States for good, according to international experts.
Yeah, so Chief Investigative Reporter Eric Flack, he packed a bag and went in search of the reasons why Americans are leaving America.
This is a special security announcement.
Do you ever think about hopping on a plane and never coming back? Corey and Matthew Strunk from Calvert County have.
We have joked that, oh my gosh, we have got to get out of here.
Jen Dewberry from Prince George's County, too.
Wouldn't it be something to be the granny who lives in Portugal?
International travel experts say they aren't alone. Americans' interest in moving out of the U.S. is on the rise. So I hopped a plane and traveled to a Living Abroad conference in Atlanta to find out why.
I think people are beginning to wonder if the U.S. is as great as they always thought it was.
Jennifer Stevens is the executive director for International Living, a worldwide resource for Americans moving overseas.
And when we talk about these modern conveniences,
In October, International Living hosted this boot camp for people looking to retire abroad.
Where are you from?
Texas.
Texas. Okay. Maryland.
Hundreds paid for access to information on everything from buying a home in another country to finding an expat community in dozens of overseas nations. So countries are reacting to this trend.
Absolutely.
And recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. Countries are doing that.
Recruiting, Stevens says, by loosening restrictions on travel and work visas, allowing Americans to live abroad for years without renewing the visa, or in some cases, indefinitely.
Exodus chapter 10. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs before him, and that thou mayest tell in the ears of thy son and of thy son's son what things I have wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that ye may know how that I am Yahweh, the Lord, right? And Moses and Aaron came in unto Pharaoh, and said unto him, Thus saith Yahweh Elohim of the Hebrews, How long wilt thou refuse to humble thyself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. So it's kind of a weird analogy here. You have a group of people who want to leave the country because they, in a lot of ways, they find it morally bankrupt. They think that we've gone astray. Our moral compass has ossified and is stuck pointing due north or whatever. But it's a similar thought. And so, people are trying to leave so they could, I'm not saying everybody, so they could worship God in the wilderness, but to go back to their belief systems. In order to do that, they're feeling like they have to leave this country to do it. It's kind of an interesting concept there. And afterward, Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus saith Yahweh Elohim of Yasharel, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me into the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, Who is Yahweh, that I should obey his voice to let Yasharel go? I know not Yahweh, neither will I let Yasharel go.
Guys, we need to have a conversation, because so many of you have been reaching out to us, asking us about leaving the United States, saying things like, I should leave the United States. It is just getting too crazy here. It is too expensive. It is too dangerous. All of these things that they are bringing up. You see, Christina and I have lived abroad for more than 10 years. We have lived in Spain, in Japan, in Thailand, and now we live here in Portugal. And when we first moved abroad, the questions we would get from our friends and family were always the same. Why would you ever want to leave the US? The US is one of the greatest countries in the world. Aren't you scared to live abroad? But as the years have gone on and people see how we have lived in all of these other countries, how the quality of life that we live has been amazing, how we walk around with such peace of mind, the questions have changed significantly.
And so I bring up the book of Acts chapter 2. This is around the time of the Pentecost, and I think a lot of people know the story. But I want to point out that the Jews, we have a concept that they are a certain people, they look a certain way, and it's quite the opposite effect. If you read in Acts where these Jews who were up for the feasts came from, I'm going to mention certain countries and certain areas that they came from. They weren't going there. They came from these areas just to observe the feast. And then they were going back to these areas and these countries. So there were more Jews outside of Judea than there were inside of Judea. And I'm going to bring this home in a minute, but I think it's kind of an important point to bring this up. So in Acts chapter 2, verse 5, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem certain Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven. Now, when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue, wherein we were born? Parthians and Medes and Elamites, and the dwellers in Mesopotamia, and in Judea, and Cappadocia, and in Pontus, and in Asia, and in Phrygia, and in Pamphylia, in Egypt, in parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians. We do hear them speak in our own tongues the wonderful works of Elohim. Now I find that interesting because these, if you read at the beginning, these were all Jews. But where do they come from? Let's break it down a little bit. Parthian. Well, that's getting up towards near the mountains of in Turkey. Medes. Well, that's Persia. Elam. It's kind of understood that Elam migrated towards India. So let's say these are the East Indian types, and dwellers in Mesopotamia. Of course, that's basically Babylon, Iraq, the ancient Assyrian area, Saudi Arabia area, right? And in Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia, meaning kind of Turkey, and going further east than that, because Turkey's kind of Asia Minor. Phrygia and Pamphylia, and let's get to the really interesting one, Egypt and Libya. And so you see, and it turns out in history, there were more Jews in Egypt than were in Judea. You follow? So, and Libya, North Africa, right? And this theme is going to continue as we move along.
Bring all this up because things have turned so icy between Black American men and women that there's now a popular movement called Passport Bros, an outgrowth of the Black Manosphere, the collective of YouTube content creators who discuss issues around American culture's demonization of masculinity. Passport Bros are primarily Black men who leave America shopping for wives and girlfriends in Brazil, Colombia, Thailand, Costa Rica, the Philippines, and anywhere outside of America. They're men who believe American women, particularly Black women, have the wrong values, expectations, worldview, and attitude for a serious relationship. Passport Bros chronicle their search for love and or sex on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. They're reviled and ridiculed on most social media platforms, but the movement is growing because the untreated disconnect between American Black men and women is growing wider and wider. Black women see their role as leaders of the Black community and the primary breadwinners. The Democrat Party, leftists, corporate media, and the LGBTQ movement have partnered with Black women in imposing matriarchal culture. Newton's third law applies. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
So in the book of Jeremiah, it says, Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that it shall no more be said, Yahweh liveth, that brought up the children of Yasharel out of the land of Mitzrayim. But Yahweh liveth, that brought up the children of Yasharel from the land of the north, and from all the lands whither he had driven them. And I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahweh of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off thy neck, and will burst thy bonds, and strangers shall no more serve themselves of him. But they shall serve Yahweh their Elohim, and Dawid their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Therefore fear thou not, O my servant Jacob, saith Yahweh, neither be dismayed, O Yasharel, for lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of their captivity. And Jacob shall return, and shall be in rest, and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. For I am with thee, saith Yahweh, to save thee, though I make a full end of all nations whither I have scattered thee. Yet will I not make a full end of thee, but I will correct thee in measure, and will not leave thee altogether unpunished. So Yahweh is saying he's going to bring back the children of Israel, or as I like to say, Yasharel. If you look at the spelling of it, it's more like Yasharel. But he's going to bring them back from scattered. He says, I will no longer be known as the God that brought you out of Egypt, but I'm going to do something greater than that. I want to bring you back from the four corners of the earth and bring you back into your land. And so his dilemma here is because this, if you understand what it's saying, is saying at the return of Messiah, Hamashiach, he will do these things. Up until then, shall the Holy Land be trampled down by the Gentiles, right? So that's kind of problematic for today's situation, is that it's Messiah who brings the children back from the four corners, So, I mean, we can go into more in depth and more detail than that, but let's continue. So, if you think about it, the Most High is going to bring his people back from all the four corners of the earth at the return of Hamashiach, the Messiah. So he also mentions that the places that he's going to bring them back from. And I'm going to take a quick pause here because I got a bad feeling that I skipped something. So I did a quick equipment check and everything looks good, so we'll continue on. So again, we're looking forward to essentially a second Exodus, if you read the scriptures correctly. But of course, it's at the time of Messiah. But how could that come about? Is it necessarily instantaneous thing, or is it possible that these feelings welling up in people are a precursor, and that people prepared, meaning people are who can see what's going on in the West? Their spirits are engaging them and telling them it's time to leave. It's time to. It starts out as something internal, like an internal clock going off. But now it's starting to manifest itself in the physical as people are actually starting to leave the United States of America and the West in general. And it's not drawn along racial lines. It's everybody's, if you have a certain moral compass, you're saying, this is not going to get better. This is only going to get worse. And so we have to go. Zechariah chapter 10. I will bring them again also out of the land of Egypt, and gather them out of Assyria, and I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon, and place shall not be found for them. I mean, so many people are becoming, it's going to get overloaded. And he shall pass through the sea with affliction, and shall smite the waves in the sea, and all the deeps of the river shall dry up, and the pride of Assyria shall be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt shall depart away, and I will strengthen them in the Lord, and they shall walk up and down in his name, saith the Lord. So remember, I mentioned the term Egypt. I know in the previous video I defined what Egypt means. So you have to be careful when you're reading this. He says, I'm bringing you up out of the land of Egypt. Well, Egypt is a Greek term translated from a Hebrew term, and that Hebrew term, it's Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim was the founder of the locale we call Egypt, and he was the son of Ham, who was the son of Noah, And his name, the etymology of his name, Mitzrayim, literally means besieged, a rocky place, or captivity. So when Yah says, I will bring them again also out of the land of Egypt, what he's saying is, I'll bring them again out of captivity, or out of bondage, or out of slavery. So where were they before he does all this stuff? So that's something to think about. And if you go to the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, right, it says, I know thy works, and I know the blasphemy, blah, blah, blah. And he says, I know thy poverty. He says, I know thy poverty. So at the second coming, or return of Mashiach, what condition are his people in? He says, I know thy poverty, but thou art rich. So understand what condition his people will be in when he returns. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 10. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign to the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. Now, see, Gentiles seek, and so Abraham's seed would be a light to the Gentiles. Because understand this, at the kingdom, in the kingdom age, when Christ returns, there's going to be a lot of bloodshed. And understand this, that the kingdom is the kingdom of Israel. I think, Christians they think they've replaced Israel. They have not. The physical descendants, and that's through inheritance from father to son. That line, when they talk about a nation going extinct, that's like virtually impossible. What it means is that that nation may no longer be in charge of its affairs. It may have blended in with other nations, may not speak their original language, may not even look exactly the way they looked originally through intermarriage, but the seed is counted to the father. That's the way the scriptures tell it. So anybody who says the seed is accounted to the mother, from a lineage standpoint, it's never through the mother, it's always through the father. So all it would take is a descendant of Israel, and he can marry an Arab woman, an Elamite woman, whatever. But that offspring is physically a descendant of Israel through the father. So we have to get that understanding. So it says, to it shall the ensign, to it shall the Gentiles seek. And so Gentiles can mean a lot of things. It could mean, it includes what they used to refer to as the lost tribes of Israel. Because once you have lost your knowledge of Yah, you essentially become a Gentile. You've lost touch. But yet physically, if your father's lineage, it goes all the way back to Israel, you are a physical descendant. And so these Gentiles will turn, whether you be of Israel or not, But primarily, you got to have the understanding, this kingdom is the kingdom of Israel, because their king is of the line of David. Now, that one instance is through the mitochondrial line, because the father is Yah himself. So that's the part, there's a lot of contention about that. But it's the woman's seed in this particular case. So, wow. Yah is the father. You don't get no better than that. And he decided to pass on his, his spirit to a woman of the line of David. So that's even more glorious. That's how he kind of keeps David in the loop. But understand, in the kingdom age, there will be Gentiles, and there will be converted Gentiles, and they will understand that this is the kingdom of Israel. They are just now sojourners, and there are rules for the sojourner and the stranger. And God is very sympathetic for the sojourner and the stranger, because what? Israel was a sojourner and a stranger in Egypt. And he basically told Israel, do not treat the stranger and the sojourner among you the way the Egyptians treated you. You're better than that. You will treat them well, and they will They will follow your laws and do what you do and worship me, and they will become part of the congregation over a certain period of time. And they go into that in the Old Testament a little bit. But anyway, I'll continue. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time. Second Exodus. Second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush, very important, and from Elam, there goes Elam again, and from Shinar, the Middle East, what we call the Middle East today, Iraq, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. Now that's an interesting one. I won't get all into that one right now, but I could talk about that one all day long. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. I want to focus on the fact that he talks about them coming from Cush and Egypt and Pathros. Let's look at those. All of these countries are in Africa. In fact, here's the dilemma. When he says Cush, the King James translates it as Ethiopia, and that's a Greek rendering. But Cush literally means sun blackened, right? Black people, right? So it's translated as Ethiopia. However, what you're not understanding is when they say, I'll call you from Cush, what they call Ethiopia, is at that time, it wasn't some little tiny country in East Africa. Cush literally meant all of sub-Saharan Africa. How do I know this? Because another name for Ethiopia is Abyssinia, right? So Ethiopia, Abyssinia, Cush, same thing. The entire southern Atlantic Ocean at one time was known as the Sea of Abyssinia, or the Sea of Ethiopia. That, or Cush, so the Sea of Cush, if you will, means all of the southern Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, an area bigger than China, United States, and India put together, was called Cush. So we've lost that understanding. We think Cush or Ethiopia is just some little tiny country in East Africa. No. All of sub-Saharan Africa was named Cush. And it was up against the Sea of Cush, Abyssinia, right? And from Elam, India. Wow, there's a huge ancient population of Jews in India. And people don't even know about that. Same thing in Shinar, Iraq. As you go out, and they kept migrating further east. So understand, the children of Israel, he's saying, I'm going to call you back from these places. Get that? He's telling you where they're going to be coming from. And a good portion of them are coming from Africa and India, and what we call the Middle East today. Although the Middle East, that's a misnomer, because there's no such thing as the Middle East. It's Northeast Africa is what it is. So understand where, at the second coming, at the return of HaMashiach, where it says he's calling his people back from. And then again, I say, he also says at the end, the islands of the sea. And I want to do a video on the islands of the sea, because it also could be rendered coastlines. And that can mean a lot of things. And so we'll leave that for another day. But I just want you to understand how deep this rabbit hole kind of goes. But he's telling you where they come back from. When I return, I shall bring them back from here. So family, I thank you guys all for tuning in today. I know this was a little long-winded and a little much to take in, but understand there is an ether, if you will, in the air in the West of people who want to escape what they see around them. So I'm not saying this is the second coming, and this is Yah's method of bringing everybody back to the promised land, because they're going everywhere. But it's that spirit of, I got to get away from this. They recognize it's the tipping point. They can't change it. It's going to just happen. And so now We have to get the heck out of Egypt. We have to get the heck out of Babylon. And they feel it. And so you see these movements occurring. But in the meantime, family, I love you guys all so much, and thank you for continually supporting my content. If you did enjoy this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and share this with your friends and family. I'm sure they find it interesting as well. I'm very excited to continue this journey with you guys. I thank you all for bringing up certain stories to my attention, for continually keeping me updated in certain events around the world. I very much appreciate you all. Shout out to the channel members. May everybody have a beautiful and blessed day who is in the body of Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ of Nazareth. And I'll see you in the next video. Shalom.